In Terry Tempest Williams' book, Finding Beauty in a Broken World, in almost the first pages of her exploration of making mosaics as art, she gives a few rules that she learns from her master teacher, Luciana, a mosaicist in the town of Ravenna in Italy. The rules go like this. The play of light is the first rule of mosaics. The surface of a mosaic is irregular, even angled, to increase the dance of light. The line in a mosaic is supreme. The flow of the line is what matters. While those rules might describe us, surfaces irregular that increase the light, these more profound rules apply to our lives. She writes, "There is perfection in imperfection. The gaps speak loudest. Many colors are used to create one, and distance from the mosaic is important to the design." The next page of Finding Beauty in a Broken World is blank except for these words. She writes, "A mosaic is a conversation between what is broken." A mosaic is a conversation that takes place on surfaces with light and form and color, a conversation in time. At the risk of losing you in the metaphor or the thread, I want to say this. Today we need to remember that life is perfection in imperfection. It requires a little distance to see, and there is always a line that goes back. Hold that thought. In the early 1990s, I lived in Israel on a kibbutz, cooperative farm in the Negev desert on the border of the Gaza Strip. I was 23 and restless. I worked in the fields pulling irrigation lines with tractors through cotton and potatoes and rows of corn. We turned the desert into small French carrots and potatoes and beans to send to European markets. And on Sabbath days, the day when no one worked, if I wasn't playing soccer or hanging out with an Israeli family in the kibbutz, I would take my bicycle and ride out the gate into the desert. I would ride out to one special place, a place where no plows went, a spot where on the ground was a mosaic in the middle of nowhere. The mosaic was from the Roman era, when the Romans lived in the Holy Land. The place wasn't protected, nor was it widely known, but it was a puzzle of tiles that made pictures of fish and shells and figures. It's possible it was the entry to some kind of temple or bath or a marker of an oasis where the Roman soldiers could find water in the dry landscape. The mosaic had come apart around the edges, and no one probably would ever come to fix it. There I stood on days where I wasn't plowing the earth and pulling lines in the presence of a piece of art from the time of the eruption of Vesuvius or the Emperor Vespasian. And there I was in the Israeli desert, observing the pieces of an ancient puzzle as it pulled me back in time. Broken pieces of stone and glass pulled me back in time. And my meditation on that mix of muted, sandy colors that some artist 2,000 years ago, who might have met Jesus or his disciples, placed in honor of Venus or in the name of the Emperor of Rome, standing there in front of this broken mosaic, it pulled me back and it pulled me together as I was young and so far from home. The beauty that emerged from those broken bits reminded me of something at work that was larger than myself and pushed me into a place of gratitude. Williams, in her book, says, "I believe in all common things. I believe in the beauty of all things broken. And the lines in the mosaic connects us," she says. The lines connect us back. I heard Parker Palmer read a poem this week, which was a meditation on William Stafford's line, "Everything falls away," in which he said, everything falls away when we come to the end of life. We can look back and see a line that holds us. Sooner or later, everything falls away. You, your successes and failures, your friends, the people who loved you, the people you loved, those who wished you well and gave you life, those who wished you ill, all go. Everything falls away. But Palmer said in his deep, gravelly voice, everything falls away but the thread you followed all along of everything you have been and done, and you realize your life hasn't been the solo turn it seemed to be. It was always part of a great weave of nature and humanity and an immensity that we only know when we follow our small threads that merge with the boundless whole. This magnificent tapestry, masterpiece, is what holds us forever. As I thought about his words, I thought about how we are part of a whole that emerges from the hopes of those who gave us life. We are part of a great hope we can't give up on that supersedes our particularities. Part of the great mosaic of life that takes on a life of its own, that extends back, extends forward. And our small parts, however important or however insignificant we think they are part of this whole. I think one of the benefits of this moment in the world, is that we have been forced to see that bigger picture beyond the solo turns we thought we were leading. Forced to go internally rather than living externally, racing around, filling our lives with things and business. This time in our world has tested our hopes and asks us to reflect on the threads that tie us back to one another. And that is scary for many. And we react with polarization and anger and judgment and a whole host of emotions, and some can step back and see it in gratitude and hope. The wholeness of what we are. So here we are in the moment of a pandemic, and the poem this morning says, Insha'allah, if God wills it. It reminds us that in so many ways, while we plan, God laughs. Insha'allah. So many plans I've laid have unraveled, says the poet, unraveled easily as braids beneath my mother's quick fingers. And the poem makes me think of that line as we celebrate Mother's Day and all its fraught quality and all its trouble and all its joy, that says, a mother is the truest friend we have when trials heavy and sudden fall upon us. They dissipate the clouds of darkness and cause peace to return to our hearts. Our mothers, and theirs, and so forth, their bodies, their hands, their helps, their hopes, their dreams, all live in us. And whether they were good at it or intended to give us life or not, or failed miserably at being mothers, whether they were the mothers we wanted or the mothers we needed, something beneath the surface of all that says to me there is a nurturing intention in giving life through the womb, which has a deep DNA in hope. A hope that we will thrive even in the dark, even in the storms. A hope that is older than all of us. Life itself, given to us by whoever, whenever, however, holds a thread. And that thread is a hope in the world for our survival. Our survival through empires and occupation, pandemics and confinement and economic distress and loneliness and more. The threads of the pieces of mosaic that make us up are holy and hold us together. If we can connect them and we can stand back and see that even in the brokenness there is strength, we will be blessed by this moment. Williams, in her book, spends time in Italy learning mosaics, and then in a broken neighborhood in Philadelphia where they find pieces of glass and turn them into beautiful mosaics that surround community gardens, places where the hopelessness is tangible. Mothers of the community lead the way. And then she goes to Rwanda, She goes to Ruggiero, a community rebuilding itself, not a generation after genocide, a genocide of its own people on its own people. And she meets community leaders who have buried the bones of the dead in a safe area in which they want to make a memorial, a place, a library where their children can read about their history. And the local government tells them their priorities. The government says our priorities are security and shelter and welfare, to raise the economy, to bring education and medicine. They know these issues relate directly to how poverty led to genocide. And the mothers of the place know something else about the threads, about the pieces of the mosaic that are life. That what is stronger than government plans to revitalize economies is hope. Williams tells them the quote from William Sloane Coffin that says, "The world is too dangerous for anything but truth and too small for anything but love." Social change for them depends on love and hope, and in so many ways it does for us. So the women want a beautiful memorial building and a library, and they want artists to make mosaics with the people from the place that cover the walls. They want Hutus and Tutsis, the tribal neighbors who took machetes to each other's bodies, to go together to find pieces of tile to make mosaics and build something beautiful. The local government complies and gives them a year to build their memorial. So the women gather men and children and each go out and find broken tiles, colorful representations of Rwanda, yellow and green and red, and they look especially for purple tiles that represent mourning. They teach the men and the women and the children how to find the shards of things thrown away, and then how to work the mosaic into stucco walls until it creates joy in the bleakest place on earth, until they can step back and see it. There is perfection in imperfection. The gaps speak loudest. Many colors are used to create one. Distance from the mosaic is important to the design. That is what they do. At the dedication of the Museum of Memory for the Dead, national figures show up in limousines, and one of them says, "May we never forget our loved ones who are buried here, or the power of forgiveness or reconstruction." And the lead artist takes the stand and says, "We have painted the village. We have created this together, and it is beautiful. We remember, we will never forget that we stand together united. This community is renewed by beauty. It moves toward joy and a peaceful, brilliant future called hope." On the day of remembrance, some months later, a woman speaks at the memorial, standing in front of the mosaic walls. This woman had been discriminated against for being Tutsi, and then war came in 94, and the Hutus came and burned her husband and threw grenades into the priest's house where she was keeping her family. And they cut her and left her to mourn her children, and after 2 days, her husband found her, and he was badly burned, and they went to the neighbors asking for help, and they hid in the fields, and the neighbors brought them food, and for 2 months they survived in the fields. Many had died in that war, in that genocide, and this woman survived. And on the day of remembrance, standing in front of the beautiful memorial that all her neighbors had made, she said, "We must stand together, hopeful and unified." At the end of the story, she told, the villagers said to the artists, "This woman's name is Ubohamya. Her name means testimony. She calls us to unity." The women led this movement for memory and beauty. They reminded all that they were not Hutu or Tutsi, but Rwandans, They reminded their people that they are all perfect in imperfection, broken but whole together. All God's children, where the gaps in what they say speak the loudest, and the symbols of hope sing of God's will to all. Insha'allah. Insha'allah. Every language must have a word for this. A word our grandmothers uttered under their breath as they pinned the whites soaked in lemon, hung them to dry in the sun, or peeled potatoes, dropping the discarded skins into the bowl. Our sons will return next month, insha'Allah. Insha'Allah, this war will end. Insha'Allah, the rice will be enough to last through winter. How lightly we learn to hold hope, the poet says, as if it were an animal that could turn around and bite your hand. And still we carry it the way a mother would, carefully, from one day to the next. We are the mosaics of time and energy. The hopes and dreams and fulfillments and failures, and all together, we are stronger than any challenge we face, and we are blessed. We are blessed if we hold the threads, if we step back and see the beauty of the mosaic of life. There is a story of hope and love. Amen and amen.